If you're planning a trip overseas this year and you're on the age pension, there is one phone call you could forget to make that ends up costing you hundreds of dollars a fortnight. It happens more than you think. Someone books their flights, packs their bags, flies off to see the grandkids in the UK or spend winter in Bali, and 3 months later they come home to a letter from Centrelink saying their payment has been reduced. Not because they did anything wrong on purpose, just because nobody told them the rules changed once you cross 6 weeks, and change again at 26 weeks. By the end of this video, you will know exactly what those rules are, what triggers are cut, what you can do to protect your full payment, and the one mistake that trips up more retirees than anything else. So stick around, because this could genuinely save you real money on your next holiday. Welcome back to Australia Pension and Centrelink Update, the channel where we break down exactly what's happening with your payments. In plain English, no jargon, no confusion. If you're new here, consider subscribing, because we cover these updates every single week and you do not want to miss the next one. Today we're talking specifically about the age pension and overseas travel in 2026, because here's the good news up front: you are allowed to travel. The age pension does not stop just because you leave the country. In fact, out of all the Centrelink payments, the age pension is one of the most flexible when it comes to travel. But flexible does not mean unlimited, and there are some very specific timeframes and rules you need to understand before you book that trip. Let's start with the basics. The moment you decide to travel overseas, even for a short holiday, you need to tell Centrelink. This isn't optional, and it isn't something you can quietly skip. You can notify them up to 12 weeks before you leave, and the easiest way to do this is through your Centrelink online account linked to MyGov. You simply select the Travel Outside Australia option, enter your departure date and your expected return date, and Centrelink takes it from there. Now, here's something a lot of people don't realise. Australia's Immigration Department automatically tells Centrelink when you leave the country and when you return. But that does not mean you're off the hook for reporting it yourself. Centrelink still expects you to notify them directly, and if you don't, it can cause payment issues, delays, or even overpayment problems down the track that you'll have to pay back later. So even though the system talks to itself in the background, do not rely on that. Log in, report your travel, and keep a record that you did it. Now let's get into the time frames, because this is really the heart of what you need to know. The first major checkpoint is 6 weeks. If you are overseas for 6 weeks or less, your basic age pension rate generally continues without any change. This is the sweet spot most retirees aim for when planning an overseas trip, whether it's visiting family, going on a cruise, or spending a few weeks somewhere warm during the Australian winter. But here's where people get caught out. While your core pension rate might continue, certain supplementary payments do not enjoy the same protection. Once you pass the 6-week mark, some of your supplements start to reduce. Things like the pension supplement and the energy supplement can be affected once you go beyond that 6-week window, even if your basic pension itself hasn't changed yet. So if your trip is going to run a little longer than 6 weeks, you need to go in with your eyes open about which parts of your payment are protected and which parts might quietly shrink. The second and much bigger checkpoint is 26 weeks. This is the big one, so pay close attention. You can generally travel overseas for up to 26 weeks without your age pension payment changing in a major way. That's about 6 months, which is actually really generous compared to other Centrelink payments. For comparison, if you're on Job Seeker, your payment can be suspended almost immediately once you leave the country. Age pensioners have far more breathing room. But once you cross that 26-week line, the rules tighten significantly, and this is where your payment can actually be reduced long-term, not just have a few supplements paused. Here's how it works. After 26 weeks overseas, your age pension will be adjusted based on something called your Australian Working Life Residence, often shortened to AWLR. This is essentially a measure of how many years you lived in Australia between the age of 16 and pension age. If you lived and worked in Australia for 35 years or more, your pension will not decrease at all, even after the 26-week mark. That's the magic number, 35 years. If you've got that full 35 years of residency under your belt, you can genuinely relax about long overseas stays, because your payment is protected at the full rate regardless of how long you're away. However, if you lived in Australia for less than 35 years, your pension gets reduced proportionally once you're overseas beyond 26 weeks. So if you've only got, say, 20 years of Australian residency in that working life window, your pension while overseas long-term would be calculated at a proportion of the full rate based on that 20 out of 35 years. This is a really important number to know before you plan an extended trip, especially if you migrated to Australia later in life or spent a chunk of your working years overseas before settling here. Now, some of you watching might be thinking, wait, I've heard about a 25-year rule, not 35. And you're right to have heard that, because there's an important detail here. Before the 1st of July 2014, the requirement was 25 years of Australian working life residence, not 35. People who were already living overseas as of the 1st of July 2014 have generally been grandfathered under that old 25-year rule. So if that's you or someone in your family, it's worth checking which rule actually applies to your situation, because it can make a real difference to how much pension you receive while living overseas long term. One catch though, if a grandfathered person returns to Australia for longer than 26 weeks and then leaves again, they get reassessed under the newer rules. So that grandfathering isn't permanent no matter what you do. It depends on your travel pattern too. There's another rule that catches a surprising number of people off guard, and it applies specifically if you're planning to move overseas permanently or for a very long stretch rather than just going on holiday. Portability of the age pension actually requires an initial period of residence within Australia of at least 2 years while you're receiving the pension. And there's a related trap for anyone who leaves the country, comes back and reapplies for the pension. If you're granted the age pension after returning to Australia, there's a 2-year waiting period before that pension becomes portable overseas again. Why does this rule exist? Basically, Centrelink wants to discourage a specific pattern of behaviour, someone briefly returning to Australia just long enough to qualify for the pension and then immediately heading back overseas to collect it from afar. So if your plan involves coming home, reapplying and then leaving again fairly quickly, you need to factor that 2-year portability wait into your planning. Let's talk about rent assistance too, because this one catches people who are renting and didn't expect it to be affected by travel at all. Regardless of which payment you're on, rent assistance generally stops if you're overseas for more than 26 weeks. So if part of your pension income relies on that rent assistance component and you're planning a stay of more than 6 months overseas, factor that loss into your budget for the trip. Now let's talk about how to actually avoid these payment cuts, because that's really what this video is about. Number 1, know your exact travel dates before you go and report them to Centrelink through your MyGov account as early as possible, ideally that full 12 weeks in advance if you can. Number 2, if you can keep your trip under 6 weeks, your core payment and your supplements are the safest they'll ever be. That's genuinely the lowest risk window for a trip. Number 3, if you're planning something longer, between 6 and 26 weeks, go in understanding that some supplements may reduce, but your basic pension rate should hold steady. Budget accordingly so there are no surprises when you check your payment while you're away. Number 4, if you're planning a trip beyond 26 weeks, check your Australian working life residence before you go. If you're unsure how many years you've accumulated, call Centrelink's International Services line and ask them directly, or check through your online account. Knowing whether you're above or below that 35-year threshold changes everything about how much pension you'll receive during an extended stay. Number 5, make sure your MyGov account is linked and working before you leave the country. This is genuinely much harder to sort out once you're already overseas, so tick this box before you fly, not after. And number 6, keep reporting any changes in your financial circumstances while you're away within 14 days, just like you would if you were still in Australia. Overseas travel does not pause your reporting obligations. One last thing worth mentioning, your Centrelink portability and your tax residency are two completely separate things. Being paid your pension overseas does not automatically make you a non-resident for tax purposes, and vice versa. If that side of things matters to you, particularly for longer stays or a permanent move, it's worth having a quick conversation with a tax advisor separately, because Centrelink and the tax office look at your situation through very different lenses. So, to bring it all together, the age pension is genuinely one of the more travel-friendly payments Centrelink offers, but it comes with real time frames that matter. 6 weeks before supplements start to shift, 26 weeks before your core rate can be affected based on your working life residence, and specific rules around returning, reapplying, and portability that can catch people out if they're not paying attention. The people who avoid payment cuts are almost always the ones who plan ahead, report early, and know their own numbers before they board that flight. If this video helped clear things up for you, do me a favour and hit that like button. It genuinely helps this channel reach more Australians who need this exact information before their next trip. And if you haven't already, subscribe to Australia Pension and Centrelink Update, because we're covering these payment rules, rate changes and Centrelink updates every single week, and you don't want to be the last to know when something changes. Drop a comment below and let me know where you're planning to travel this year, or if you've got a question about your own situation, and I'll do my best to help point you in the right direction. Thanks so much for watching, take care of yourselves, and I'll see you in the next one.